This story happened to me this year. I used to think that things like this could only happen in movies or some kind of fantasy book. But what happened? Happened. Everyone has a hobby or a passion in life that brings them immense pleasure. Some people cannot imagine their lives without fishing, others without hunting. But I love picking mushrooms. There is a certain thrill in it, a desire to gather more and faster, just to get home and show off how much you've managed to collect. The rush of excitement is always there, whether you are alone or with a partner. Some might say, what on earth is exciting about that? Just walk, look around, and toss them in a basket. Those are the words of people who have never truly picked mushrooms in their lives. Imagine an early morning. You and your partner are standing at the edge of the forest, about to head in. The whole way there, you kept telling each other that you didn't really care about the mushrooms, that you were just there for the fresh air and the beauty of nature. But in reality, each of you has a very conscious goal: to gather more than the other. The chatter about not needing mushrooms is just a smokescreen. I don't know why or how it happens, but apparently humans are wired to always want to be the best at everything, compared to others. Then it begins. You enter the woods and start picking, and for a while you seem to forget that desire. But when you meet up again, the first question is usually something like, "So, did you get much?" Only then does the comparison start. Who found what and in what quantity? And strictly speaking, it was during such a mushroom hunt that this very story occurred.
It was the beginning of September. The weather was turning. Nights were becoming colder, and dark, thunderous clouds appeared in the sky more and more often. Summer had ended, although I hadn't even noticed it beginning. It was all the fault of this cursed job, where, it seems to me, I'm just waiting for summer from year to year, and only in autumn do I realize that it's already gone. It was exactly this thought that prompted me to take this trip with my friend. Everything was as usual. We agreed to head to the forest in the Appalachian Mountains for the weekend. They say that mountains are the bones of the earth, but the Appalachians are its living, infinite memory, a place where it is easy to dissolve without a trace. Here, among the ancient ridges shrouded in heavy, clinging fog, time does not flow by the clock, but by its own primal rules. You enter the thicket hoping for silence and your usual thrill, but the forest immediately starts playing a game of silence with you, watching every step from behind every crooked spruce. In these places, the line between "it just seemed so" and reality is thinner than a hair, and any random traveler risks becoming part of the local legends, the whispers of which people are afraid to even speak aloud. I always thought such stories were just tall tales meant for tourists to add some spice to a boring walk. Now I know the truth. Some things don't hide in the twilight, but right under our noses, waiting for us to finally let our guard down. Remember? Sometimes the most terrifying thing in the forest is not the silence, but the fact that it suddenly ends. This forest is quite dense. If you get lost in here, consider yourself gone. There are a lot of dark rumors circulating about this place. According to some stories, many people have perished in these woods. Some by their own will, hanging themselves from a branch, others who were helped. From this, a huge number of myths have emerged about the forest being full of ghosts and other blood-chilling horrors. However, to be fair to these rumors, there are quite a lot of accidents on the stretch of road bordering the forest. Some people claim, in all seriousness, that they swerved into the ditch because a woman suddenly appeared in front of them. The devil knows if they are telling the truth or lying. I've driven past it many times and never encountered anything like it, but I have encountered the fog. The fog on that stretch of road is sometimes so thick you could scoop it up with a mug. You don't drive, you crawl, hoping not to hit anyone or crash into something. Others say this little forest is a favorite spot for witches and hags. The forest is vast, and you could hold a coven in there without anyone ever knowing. Plus, not many people venture deep into the woods. In short, there is a lot of talk, but personally,
I never encountered anything like that, except for the fog. Though there were times I'd leave the forest when there were only a few hours of daylight left.
The early morning started at 6 a.m. There was an incredible silence in the woods. Genri and I were sitting in the car, all because I had set such an ungodly early time. It wasn't even properly light out yet, so hunting for mushrooms was out of the question. We had to wait for sunrise. We had already discussed our plan. It was simple. Genri and I hadn't entered from this spot for the first time, or even the 10th, so we knew this part of the woods perfectly. We also knew that about 6 kilometers ahead, there was a small ravine that stretched across the entire forest. We agreed to meet in that ravine at 11 a.m. Getting lost or missing the ravine was nearly impossible. No matter how you walked, you would eventually come out to it, and it wasn't our first time here. We walked into the forest, split up in different directions, and started searching. Naturally, I wanted to gather as much as possible, as fast as possible. The season was ending, after all, and this was likely my first and last trip of the year. The mushrooms weren't appearing often, but they were there, and that was all I needed. I reached the ravine around 10:40, climbed down, and began looking around. Doesn't look like he's here yet, I thought, and pulled out my phone. The signal was perfect. I could have called Genri at any moment, but I decided not to. I just sat down to wait. By the way, I had gathered quite a few mushrooms. Not too many, not too few, a decent haul, you could say. 10 minutes later, Genri appeared 20 meters ahead, spotted me, and walked over. "Well, Mark, did you get a lot?" "Not really," I replied. "How about you?" "Same here." "So, heading home?" I asked. "Yeah, let's go," Genri answered, and we started the journey back. While walking, we talked about this and that. After about 15 minutes, an old man caught our eye. He didn't really meet us. He seemed to appear out of thin air. We kept walking. The old man was just sitting under a tree about 20 meters away, fiddling with something in his basket. The lyrics of Kenny Rogers' The Gambler popped into my head. And somewhere in the darkness, the gambler, he broke even. But in his final words, I found an ace that I could keep. He waved his hand at us, signaling for us to come over. We did. "What happened?" I asked. "Boys, do you have a light?" the old man asked, showing us a pack of cigarettes. "Sure do," Genri said, and handed him a lighter. "Thank you," the old man beamed. "I left the house, put everything in my basket, but forgot my lighter. Thank you, boys," he said, handing the lighter back. "Keep it," Genri said. "We're heading home anyway. I'll buy one on the way, and you've got a long time to wander in the woods yet." "Thank you, son. Then here, take this." The old man rummaged through his basket, pulled out a dozen blackberries, and held them out to us. Genri reached out and took them. "All right, sons, I'll be going. Have an easy journey," he said, and walked deeper into the forest. "Want some?" Genri asked, nodding toward the berries. "Yeah, sure," I said, and got a couple of berries for myself. The berries, I must admit, were damn tasty, but unfortunately, there were so few. After eating 2 miserable little berries, I suddenly asked, for no reason at all, "Hey, don't blackberries grow in late July?" "The hell if I know," Genri replied. "Why?" "Just curious where he got the berries." "Maybe they grow near his house, or maybe it's a specific variety," he answered. This old man is kind of weird. Appeared out of nowhere, carries berries, and lives somewhere out here. I'm not saying for sure, but I don't think there's a single house in the entire area. "Mark, calm down. Why are you getting so worked up? It was just a guy who forgot his lighter, picked some berries to eat on the way. Besides, he didn't tell you he walked here. Maybe he has a car too. This is just the edge of the forest." "You know what? I think that was a leshy." "Mark, did you eat some poisonous mushrooms? You're scaring me. It was just an old man. That's it." I was bursting with nerves. "No, you wait. I once heard that a leshy can turn into an old man and sit by the road waiting for someone to pass by so we can feed them berries. And anyone who eats those berries will stay in these woods forever. And you know what? Everything I just saw looks exactly like that," I said. "Well, sure," Genri said. "It sounds plausible and I'd even believe you. But unfortunately, leshies don't exist.
so calm down. It was just an old man.
We walked back for an hour, 2, 3, and the forest showed no signs of ending. We called the rescue services, and they told us they would start looking for us soon. The GPS wasn't working. If it had, I would have just opened the map and navigated our way out. A leshy might be able to fool a person, but never a navigation system. "It's okay," I said. "Let's just sit down here." "Why?" Henry asked. "Maybe we'll find our own way out of the forest." "And what if we don't?" I countered. "Besides, there's at least a signal here. If we go somewhere else where there isn't one, we'll be left with nothing but hope. This way, we can call at any moment." "Fine. Okay, let's sit for a bit," Henry said. We sat for a long, long time. The twilight was ending, and night would soon be upon us. Henry and I had very serious disagreements on how we should proceed. He said there was no point in sitting and that we needed to walk, while I argued that we could be found much faster by the phone signal and there was no need to go anywhere. But there was one thing Henry was right about. We had no food or water. Of course, an experienced survivalist would have no trouble spending a week in the woods, but we were just regular people, spoiled by comfort. We felt absolutely terrible and didn't know where to get water. That was the exact argument Henry used to try to force me to walk in the direction where we thought the exit would be. "Fine, sit here then. The hell with you. I'm going alone," Henry said. "Suit yourself," I said, staring at the fire. I expected some kind of reaction, but no, he just stood up in silence and left. It was going to get dark soon, I thought, tossing more twigs on the fire. It was creepy sitting alone in a small circle of light in the completely dark forest. My intuition was screaming at me, demanding that I put out the fire and quietly walk away. There were real reasons for it. Someone was constantly walking around the fire. I could hear those damn footsteps. At first I thought it was Henry joking around, and I decided to call him. But when he picked up the phone and said, "Hello?" and the footsteps didn't stop, I realized it was someone else. My intuition told me the light would only make things worse, that I and my fire were visible to the entire forest, and that I needed to hide in the darkness. As soon as the footsteps stopped, I decided, what the hell, and put out the fire. It became terrifying. With the fire, there was at least some sense of comfort, but now I was left alone with these frightening footsteps. I decided not to obsess over it and just keep walking, because when you're moving and your brain is occupied with something, it's not as scary. I walked forward, trying to step as carefully as possible to avoid making noise. But the noise was so loud that I was probably audible from 10 miles away. Anyone who has ever walked in the woods at night knows perfectly well that you can't see a damn thing and you keep running into bushes. 40 minutes passed, and I noticed a little light ahead. The light was in a window, and that was good. It meant I could eat, drink, and find my way home. A forester, probably, I thought, and picked up the pace. I didn't bother knocking. I just walked up to the door and opened it. It felt unnatural. First of all, it was a shack. Second, there was only one big room. Candles were burning in holders on the walls, illuminating most of the room. But the strangest thing was that in the center of the room stood a huge table, fully set and covered with a white tablecloth. Strange, I thought, and looked around the room again. There was no one there, and I decided I would go in and wait for the owners. I sat at the table and waited. The longer I stayed in that shack, and the more I thought about why a table would be set with candles in the middle of the forest at night, the creepier I felt. Maybe dark creatures really do gather in this shack on dark nights, I thought, and became even more terrified. I concluded that I would hide behind the stove. If it were people, and they were normal, I would come out and explain the situation and why I hid. If it were evil spirits, I could just sit it out. It was already too late to leave. I heard a sharp male scream somewhere very close by, and I was too scared to go outside. I climbed behind the stove. I have to say, the view was excellent. I could see the entire room perfectly while remaining in the dark. I climbed in and waited. The owners entered the shack 5 minutes after I'd hidden. They weren't exactly human. There were about 10 small ones and a few large demons, and an old hag who was in command of them. They growled, giggled, laughed, and muttered things all at once, and it was impossible to make anything out. They sat down on the benches. Everyone sat down except for that vile old woman who remained standing in the center of the room. Everyone went quiet when she said, "You know, we aren't alone here today. We have guests." When she said that, I knew I was done for. The old woman slowly walked toward me, and I expected her to pull me out from behind the stove and give me to the demons to be torn apart. But she stopped at the floorboard and pulled on a handle I hadn't noticed. "Bring him," she said to no one in particular. 2 demons descended into the crawl space and dragged Genri out into the light. "Here is our guest," the old woman said. "The Leshy decided to treat us today." With a gag in his mouth, Genri was moaning something, and I watched him in horror. They laid him in the center of the table, and I stopped watching. I decided to cover my ears too. Piece by piece, live with a regular kitchen knife, the pieces were laid out on the plates. In horror at the realization of what was happening, I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was still behind the stove. I peeked out and looked at the room. Emptiness. No benches, no tables. Nothing. An ordinary empty room with a window through which daylight was streaming. I climbed out from behind the stove and headed for the exit. As I opened the door, I heard the creak of a floorboard behind me. I turned around in horror and saw a multitude of eyes watching me from the darkness. And someone said, "Come back for a visit, kid." I shrieked and ran away from there. As I ran, only one thought kept spinning in my head. They knew. They knew I was behind the stove. They wanted me to see it.